Good morning, this is Thomas from thomasyoungauthor.com, and today is August 4th, 2026. It's almost 11 a.m. So it's a late recording, but I hope you'll enjoy watching it anyway. Today I don't want to really talk about, you see, the piggy network and all the stuff I've been talking about in my recent videos, but I want to talk a little bit about a concept that is very that people need to understand, to also understand what gangstalking is all about. Now, I'm not an expert on these issues, but I've been I've experienced like a really bad form of gangstalking for the past 10 years. When it was really intense, and where I was really, they managed to isolate me from people, where I constantly got in trouble, ended up in psychiatric facilities. Thank God I never ended up in prison, and because they also tried that, of course. But because I want to understand it, and I don't fully understand it. Because you see, one thing you have to understand about this, there are a lot of strange things happening to you, like really strange things, constantly. And you see, you can never really put your finger on these things. I still don't. Because, for example, there were many times where the gangstalking network had the opportunity to kill me, basically. Get away with me, and they didn't. But there were other moments where I knew my life was in danger, and I managed to get away from them. And I don't know how I did it, but I also had the help of other people. There were always people who sort of, without me saying, recognized what was going on and helped me. It's also the reason why I ended up in the psychiatric. I mean, ending up in the psychiatric facilities has saved my life in the end. Although there are also people from the network, so it's always a strange thing. But you see, these are the things you cannot say, because if you cannot talk to people about it also, because these things are so crazy and unbelievable. And I consider myself a person, I can articulate myself very well. I have no problem doing that, and I can explain very well. But it is almost impossible, because and for the first few years I also didn't really understand what's going on. And when sort of the gangstalking stopped, I thought, oh no, you just imagined it. For example, one thing that was, especially in the beginning, there were times when, for example, I don't know, I left my apartment in Amsterdam and I would go to the pharmacy a few hundred meters away. And then on my way there were constantly small black cars crossing with really these dark black tainted windows, constantly. And you think, I mean, this cannot be real. I mean, on my way to the pharmacy, 3 or 4 of that cars passing me, and on the way back. And this was a daily thing, or you constantly see the same cars, or the same type of cars in the same spot, and all really strange. But at some point you see, this must be real or something. But it's hard to explain, and it's also strange because the gangstalking is linked also to the piggy network. And also, I mean, there are a lot of times when you notice there is really a coordinated effort from that network. So people are ganging up on you. And for example, whenever I encounter Tom and Berto, it is never a coincidence. These things were prepared well in advance. So these are really the thing. But then there's also behavior that is not, clearly, because not everybody engaging in the gangstalking does that on a conscious level, if you know what I mean. And I also don't understand why I am exposed to this. First of all, I'm not a criminal or anything. I didn't do anything criminal. If you know what I mean. I do know that I, let's say, went to certain places or had, you know, from a very early age, I lived sort of a promiscuous lifestyle from the age of basically 13. So I came across probably these dangerous people, even though I didn't perceive it back then at the time, but I was on the radar from very early on. But you see, I also have one of the strong, I'm confident that people from the network are in my family, in my very close family. And that is also something that is really hard to understand. Because if you grow up and you have, let's call them caregivers, who are basically there to sabotage and exert violence on the people they have to take care of. That is, so I was basically, and in a way, I feel like me and my siblings were groomed into this. I know of a sibling who performed certain duties for a piggy network of the piggy. Maybe they're all interconnected. I don't know how things work, but you know, because you can never put your finger on it. You know there's some really dark stuff going on around you, but you can never really tell what's really going on. And that makes it also hard to explain to people. But there were caregivers, I have to say, who believed me when I talked to them immediately. Not in this country, by the way, you're not from here. You see this, no, you're crazy, Thomas, you're paranoid. There is no such thing, although they should know better. These are educated people, and I know how to articulate. They should have known that I'm not a crazy person. Because here at the psychiatric facilities, on the one hand, they were saying I'm a crazy person, and on the other hand, they said, no, you have no issues. You have to go away, go and be homeless and stuff like that. This is really crazy. You see, but talking about this, a concept you will have to understand is what is now, that is the preferred term I like to use for it, and that is called mimetic violence. You see, I mean, in the world we live in, most like overt and sort of very physical forms of violence have disappeared. But that does not mean that the violence has disappeared. The violence is just channeled differently. And it doesn't look like violence anymore. And whenever that violence is I don't know, it's directed at you, other people cannot really see it. Violence has become like almost like a, you know, there's something very deceptive about it. It doesn't appear as violence anymore. And how does that relate to, you know, the issues I'm talking about the gay identity and the queer identity and that kind of stuff? You see, that these forms of violence, these forms of mimetic violence, are often mistaken for homophobia. I think that is also one of the drivers why a lot of people, serious people, also still go to the pride parades. Because they are being told, oh, that mimetic violence you experience is homophobia. They hate you because you're, I don't know, gender non-conforming, or because you're homosexual. And all that violence you encounter is directed at you. That is a form of homophobia. And this is also how these people are basically being deceived and instrumentalized. And saying, and because, you know, everybody experiences these forms of violence, whether they're homosexual or not, or whether they are gender non-conforming or not. But people deal with these things in different ways, or are better equipped to deal with these things. Because me, growing up, you know, I had caregivers who exerted a lot of violence against us, but it was not physical violence at all. You know, one of my caregivers was extremely violent towards the people that person had to take care of. You know, constant manipulation, gossip, even, that kind of stuff. So I constantly, I was a person growing up that had this sort of overwhelming feelings of inadequacy and shame and everything, which was so overwhelming that I could basically not function. I was not able to connect to other people and that kind of stuff. I was always alone, I was a loner, that kind of stuff. But also my other siblings, so we all had that problem anyway. And yeah. But you see, when you're young and you don't really understand that, you cannot put your finger on it, and you think, why am I that way? And one of my ways of dealing with that thing was engaging in sex and sexual activity from a very early age, and also in the sort of risky sexual behaviors, like, you know, going out to the forest to have sex with you, these kind of stuff. So, and that was also, I think, one of the part why, you know, the gangstalking or the piggy network said, well, Thomas is a perfect candidate to become part of the piggy network. He's so fucked up. Why not be a prostitute? Why isn't he selling himself for money? If you know, so I was under the radar of these people from, you know, from a very early age, and even though I was a loner. But you see, I never ended up in the network. There was never a moment, except when that Tom guy called me, and then, what was it? I don't know, 3-4 years ago, something like that. And he made something 4 or 5 years ago, and he called me, and then I was actually engaging in serious conversation with him at a weak moment, and they always know when to call you. And I was having a serious discussion with him on why I thought it was a bad idea for me to become a prostitute. Because he said, Thomas, you can make a lot of money, but it was refused, and this is really strange, but you know what I mean? I was the perfect candidate, although I always resisted becoming that person. No, and you know, because, you know, I'm a homosexual, and I also feel that I have this sensibility for these things. So whenever such a person who exerts all that violence, who is very sort of manipulative and evil, basically, you know, I display very strange behaviors. I become very sort of docile, servile, even that kind of stuff, because it feels that was the way I've been groomed also by my caregivers, you know what I mean? And I want to talk a bit about a story now. I want to tell you a little bit of a story about that sensibility. So I'm participating in this walking group, and this walking group also has a group app. So, and then there are constant talk about things in that group app that have nothing to do with walking. And what annoys me even more is that people are participating in that group app who I never seen walking with us, who have never, you know, who don't even participate in the group, but they're in the group app. So at some point I said, why don't we throw these people out of the group app? And then you should have seen the looks on their faces. They looked like scared. We don't have to do that. And the funny thing was, you see, I perceived that as a form of violence. Because when you grew up around people that are like extremely manipulative and, you know, cause trouble, you know, are basically out, you know, always play this game of, always manipulate people, always, you make sure that other people are in conflict with each other and stuff like that. And that is what I sensed about these people that are still in the group app. They want your information from the group app. You know what I mean? So this is not innocent, but then I was portrayed as the one who was here evil and violent because, you know, how dare you suggest to throw these people out? Thomas, don't you have any empathy? I mean, this is the kind of world we live in. I mean, this is a form, and that person that's still in the group app is linked to another person I told you about, who provides through another person, you know, information about me to the Piggy network. And I know because in another volunteering job I'm doing, she was there, and then I noticed that these two were constantly talking about stuff that was going on there, even though they don't, one of them doesn't even participate in that. And they said, and then they let you know, and they said, yeah, I heard this and that about you, Thomas. And they present it as if it's, they say like, oh, full disclosure, you know, we talk, there's nothing to hide. No, these are demonstrations of violence. This is a demonstration of power, basically. So yeah, and that is what we encounter every day. But you see, you should never mistake that for homophobia. That is violence, you know, everybody encounters. And that is a challenge for everybody, because that is, I find, still hard to deal with. And the people of the gangstalking network know that I have this sensibility and that I'm not very well equipped to deal with these people, and that whenever I'm with these people, you know, I display certain behaviors or I get weak. Now, I mean, it has gotten better. I'm a confident person now. I can deal with it, and I'm aware of it. But it took me a very long time to do so. I think, you know, and that also made me, you know, sort of as a perfect target, you know, for the gangstalkers, because they know who you are. They have studied you for years. They know how you tick psychologically. They know everything about you. They are constantly informed, and they know that there are a lot of violent people out there willing to help them. Okay, well, enough for today. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.